Good morning, folks. Welcome to Wishwell Farms. My name's Jason, and in today's video, I will be explaining how and why we plant seeded watermelon pollinator plants in our seedless watermelon patch, as well as putting out our field tomato stakes, getting them pounded in, and maybe even running our first string trellis using the Florida weave system. So these plants here are our seeded watermelon pollinator plants, and as you can see, they're starting to flower out. So we need to get these things planted. So we're gonna get these pollinator plants loaded up, taken out to the field. And once we get out there, I'll show you how and why we are interplanting these with our seedless watermelons. It's only gonna take like one flat per row. So we'll probably only need like 12 flats. So they should fit in the Ranger. Broccoli's looking really nice. Cauliflower looks decent, except this one variety. It must have been some old seed. That is terrible. But the rest of it looks really good. Cantaloupe planting number 2 is getting close. And the third and final cantaloupe planting just emerged a few days ago. Cucumber number 2, zucchini number 2, cabbage. The leftover basil, we will sell out of it this weekend. And planting number 2 of tomatoes. We'll probably put those in the next week or two. All right, I'm gonna get the rest of these pollinator plants loaded up into the Ranger, and then we'll head down to the field. All right, everybody's out here in the watermelon patch, dropping their pollinator plants down the rows. Man, what a beautiful day. So this is what our watermelons currently look like. You can see they're starting to vine out. In about a week, they'll be vining off the plastic. So we definitely want to get these in. And what we're gonna do is make a little slit in the plastic near the drip line and just pop those through the plastic into the dirt. So we find it easier to throw out the pollinators first, and then we'll come back and plant them. 3 seedless watermelon plants between each pollinator. So down the center of each row, we have our seedless watermelons. And just off center, about 5 or 6 inches, we have a drip irrigation line. So probably right there. So we're gonna poke a hole right next to the drip line with these little sticks, pull it open to form a little hole. And then we just jam our pollinator down inside the hole. Make sure there's good soil to root ball contact, and we're good to go. And you can see how moist the dirt is. I irrigated it for about 5 hours last week in preparation for today. This is gonna go fairly quickly today because I only have 10 rows here. Down the way across the field where those silos are, I have 2 more rows that we'll have to drive over and do those next. But these rows are only about 400 feet long, and we only got 10. In the past, I've grown up to 16 rows, 550 feet long, but we were just almost getting too many seedless watermelons. So since we've scaled back somewhat over the years, this seems to be about the right amount for us. Seedless watermelons are sterile. They need pollen from a seeded watermelon to be transferred from them to the female flowers of the seedless watermelon. Once that takes place by bees or other pollinating insects, then a fruit will finally form on the seedless watermelons. And it doesn't have to necessarily be a pollinator watermelon. You can use any seeded watermelon. So if you have a favorite seeded watermelon that you enjoy growing or eating, you can plant those right alongside your seedless, and it will do the same job that our pollinator watermelons are doing. The reason they're called pollinators is because they are very inexpensive seed, and they produce lots and lots of flowers. They're very vigorous because you want the flowers of the pollinator to be opened and ready for the bees before the flowers open on the seedless watermelons, or you might miss that window of getting them pollinated at the proper time. So we will not harvest our seeded watermelons. The little pollinator seeded watermelons that we're planting out here produce a very small, like a softball size, pale green fruit. It's nothing that you want to harvest, and it's full of seeds. The main purpose of it is just to be out here to provide pollen to be transferred from them to the female flowers of the seedless watermelons. We just about have this job wrapped up here already. So you can see we have 3 seedless, a pollinator. 1, 2, 3 seedless and a pollinator. 1, 2, 3 seedless and a pollinator. On down the row, on every row. Just about finished up here. Just wrapping up 2 rows in the middle, about the final third of the field. And then Gavin's gonna take the Ranger on the other side of that woods by the silos where we have 2 more rows by Joel's garlic. And he will put those in, and then we'll be finished with our pollinators. So I know a lot of you are still gonna have more questions about why we're doing this. Why do seedless watermelons need a pollinator? And why won't they grow fruit without one? So instead of me trying to remember all these scientific details, I'm just gonna read it to you off Google while they're finishing this up. And you know, some of them had questions as well, so they'll be able to hear me reading this and maybe they will understand it more as well. So seedless watermelons, being a triploid, need a pollinator watermelon because they are sterile and cannot self-pollinate. They require viable pollen from a seeded diploid watermelon to initiate fruit development. While the resulting fruit will be seedless, the pollination process requires the seeded pollinator to provide the necessary pollen. And then it elaborates even further into more scientific detail. I'll just read a little bit of this. I don't want to bore you too much. So, seedless watermelons are bred to be triploid, meaning that they have 3 sets of chromosomes instead of 2, like their seeded counterparts, diploid. This extra chromosome set makes them sterile and unable to produce viable pollen. So hopefully that explains it a little bit. It goes further into detail there. If you have more questions or you're curious about more details about that, just look it up on Google. It's going to do a lot better job explaining it than what I can do. I was mistaken. We only got 1 row of seedless over here. It's too bad the pollen from cantaloupe can't pollinate them. That's not the way it works. I wasn't going to put seedless over here. I didn't really want 1 random row of seedless watermelon mixed in with my 8 rows of cantaloupes. But I had the plants and I had the space, so we went ahead and laid this extra row. And Gavin's putting in the final row of pollinator plants. You can see there's lots of moisture down there. All right, while he's getting that finished up, I'm gonna go get my tractor and hook up to my tomato stake wagon, which is in our old dairy barn right there. Got our tomato stake wagon hooked up en route back to the farm. Speaking of the farm, there's a nice view. All of our plastic mulch and early sweet corn. So we got 2 people throwing out stakes, 2 people hand placing the stakes into the beds, and 2 people pounding them in, walking behind them. So our tomatoes are planted at a spacing of 2.5 feet. They're putting a stake in the ground every 2 plants, which is a 5-foot spacing on the tomato stakes. We got 4 rows of tomatoes out here. Each row has 2 varieties in it. 2 rows of eggplant, 5 rows of bell peppers, 4 rows of bell peppers, a row of red beets, zucchini, and cucumbers and yellow squash. I was just admiring the sweet corn. It's loving this heat and sunshine. It's almost waist high. Looking really healthy. We'll take a little walk out into it here in a little bit. Looking good. At first glance, it looks like Elijah's are in deeper than Gavin's. Yours in deep enough, Gavin?
Huh?
Are yours going in deep enough?
I guess they feel sturdy.
Okay. Can you see the soil line? That's the important part. Getting it close to the old soil line on the stake. All right, we just about have them all thrown out. Got a few random ones left here. And then I'm gonna have to run back to the other farm because I got about 6 or 7 bundles of brand new ones. And we're gonna need them to finish out these 2 rows, I think. Think so? Yeah, we might have enough. It'll be close. Beautiful. Look how nice and straight those are. Perfection. Usually when you get someone new out here, they'll have a whole bunch of them leaning, especially if they're pounding from one side or the other. Whatever side they're pounding on is the way they tend to lean. So I usually tell my guys to straddle the row, kind of like this, when they're pounding, and it helps you keep the row straighter. These guys are doing a phenomenal job. They're gonna feel it in their abs and their core tomorrow morning.
Not going to the gym tomorrow.
By the way, folks, this is Elijah. He just started this week.
Yep.
And everybody knows Gavin, if you've been following my channel. And we have Ken in the red and Amanda in the gray, hand placing the stakes into the beds. And then down there at the other end is Natalie and Emma. We got a few random plants that didn't make it. No big deal. I have some leftovers in the greenhouse. So later on this afternoon when we're done here and after lunch, I'm gonna bring some of those extra plants out of the greenhouse with me down here on the Ranger, drive up and down the rows and pop in new fresh plants where others have maybe died or maybe don't look good. Every now and then you'll get one that's just barely hanging on for dear life. Maybe it didn't get planted deep enough and I'll pull those out and put a new one in. So I was just telling everybody that on eggplant, we get flea beetle and potato beetle infestations. And here's the first of the potato beetles I've seen this year. And they're eating the leaves bad already. See how they've munched it right there? Pretty good. Let me show you a flea beetle. There's some flea beetles right there. The GoPro's terrible at focusing in and close, but that little black bug, they kind of hop around almost like a flea, but they'll like put pinholes through your leaves. But the potato beetles, they will eat the entire plant, all the leaves, and then the plant will die. So right here you can see where potato beetles have eaten half the leaf already and laid a cluster of eggs right there. See that little cluster of orange eggs? So I need to stay on top of this or we'll lose our eggplant. I'm gonna try some organic labeled insecticides first and see if I can knock them back with those. And if I can't, I do have some different traditional or conventional insecticides. And if I have to spray those, I will. I'm not gonna risk losing my crop just trying to keep organic. But I will try that method first. You guys are welcome to try to convince some of these other guys to take your place if you did a break.
Mama ain't raised no quitter.
All right, I'm down here in one of our old barns at the dairy, and I got brand new tomato stakes on this wagon where my plastic mulch and drip tape is. This barn right here was where we stored our dry chopped hay that we fed our 100 Holstein milking cows since 1963, I believe, 63 or 64. But now it's just used for storage. Joel keeps some of his round bales here for his livestock. He has goats and sheep and a couple cattle. And we used to do our green beans here, wash and pack our green beans, but we moved that back to my place. And this right here is a wagon full of blue pallets that we used for displaying our pumpkins in our yard. So we would lay these all out in our yard and the pumpkins would sit on top of the pallets instead of down in the grass, because they would also often rot if we put them directly in the grass. So that's what that is. And here are the tomato stakes. Looks like I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 brand new bundles. En route back to the tomato field. I arrived back to the field. To my surprise, they had enough. That's pretty. 2 rows are pounded in, we still got 2 to go. So I didn't even need these new ones. And that's good because I bet we're gonna need them on our next planting, which is 2 rows. So right now we're just gonna load up all the broken pieces. I wanna drive around the field, throw all the old junky ones or the extra ones back in the wagon and put them back in the barn. All right, we just about have it wrapped up here. It's lunchtime. All right, back out here in the field after lunch, and I wanted to give you a look at our sweet corn. This variety is Bolt. It's looking pretty nice. Clean and healthy. And what is this? A tassel. That's right, this stuff starts tasseling even when it's 2 feet tall. This variety will probably only get 5 feet tall, and the ears will only be about 14 or 15 inches off the ground. So it's easy pickings for raccoons. We'll do our best to keep them out of here, but there's always a few that get in here. Birds are a bigger concern. So I got a few different techniques I'm gonna try to use this year to deter the birds, and that'll be discussed in more detail in later videos as this corn gets taller and closer to harvest. But yeah, real happy with the way the sweet corn looks. We just have one problem. I haven't told you guys about this problem yet because I'm pretty embarrassed about it. I don't want this to turn into the focus of this video. This video is all about tomato steaks, tomato stringing. We're gonna talk about our varieties tomorrow when we're out here stringing. We ran out of time today, so tomorrow we'll finish pounding in the next 2 rows. We only got 2 done. We'll pound in the next 2, and then we're gonna get them all strung up using the Florida weave system because some of the plants are starting to flop over. They need to get done before they're all laying flat on the ground, and it just turns into a big headache, and it almost takes 2 people to get them strung up right instead of 1. All right, back to the sweet corn. I can't believe I did this. It's a big blunder, pretty big mistake. And it's the first time it's ever happened to me in over 30 years of growing sweet corn. I started back when I was in high school, halfway through high school, riding on the planter with my dad, putting out our family sweet corn patch. And then as it started to grow into 1 acre, 3 acres, you know, I would still ride with him and tell him what varieties I wanted and how much I wanted to put out until we got up to about 10 acres. And then I got my own planter and I started planting it all myself. So yeah, probably over 30 years and never have made this mistake. And it was even on video. I actually went back and looked at my footage to see if I really did make this mistake. And you guys that have John Deere 7000 corn planters didn't catch it. I messed up my driver and driven sprockets. In the back of the corn planter, for those of you who have no clue what I'm talking about, in the back of a John Deere 7000 corn planter, there are sets of sprockets. One's called the driver, one's called the driven. And you can move the chain around on these different sprockets to give you a different seed population. For example, sweet corn, you want to plant around 20, you know, some people plant as low as 18,000 up to 24,000 seeds per acre on sweet corn. Field corn, you plant somewhere between 30 and 37,000. Probably that 32 to 34,000 is average for field corn these days. Seeds per acre. So you plant field corn way closer together, like 5 inches. Sweet corn needs like 9 or 10 inches. It needs way more space because you want it to produce a perfect, marketable, harvestable ear to sell. So I mixed up my sprockets and did them backwards. The driver was the driven and the driven was the driver. And I planted this darn sweet corn at 30,800. Oh, jeez. I'm embarrassed to tell you because it's actually not funny. I might not get a good harvest out of here. I might have a bunch of little miniature ears. I called Rupseed about it and told them what I did to see what they thought. I mean, there's nothing I could do about it. By the time I realized it, that I had made this mistake, the corn was already up 4 to 6 inches. You know, I had missed my window of opportunity to plant again, right? So it happened on my early patch of Bolt, my early patch of Kickoff, which was planted on the same day, and patch number 2 of Kickoff, which fortunately is only 1 acre. So we're looking at about 5 acres of corn put in at the wrong population, 30,800. And I was shooting for 22,000. If I would have had those sprockets reversed, it would have been 22,000, right where I like my early corn. And since then, you know, we're at planting 6 now, I think, already. Those plantings, number 3, 4, 5, and 6, have all gone in at 20,600. That's the sprocket setting I like to use just because it's easy and quick for me to switch it back to green beans. I only got to change 1 sprocket instead of 2. So yeah, that is the little dilemma with sweet corn. What do you guys think is going to happen? Let me know down in the comments below. Have you ever made a mistake like this? Or what is your best guess that's going to happen to this corn crop? Are my ears going to be smaller, skinnier, shorter in length? Is it going to be worthless and not even harvestable? I sure hope not, because I got thousands and thousands of dollars riding on this little corn patch right here. Oh boy, that's a doozy of a mistake. But it is what it is. Live and learn. I'll make sure I never make that mistake again. All right, it's the next day and we're finishing up pounding in our tomato steaks. And to give Gavin and Elijah a little break from this, I decided to leave them in the greenhouse to do some plant maintenance. And we have Natalie and Emma out here doing row 3 and 4. And I think they might be out pounding the guys. They are making quick work of the tomato stake pounding. We only got another 150 feet to go. And then we will come back out here with our boxes of tomato twine and run our first string trellis using the Florida weave. Oh, before we start running our strings, I wanted to go over my tomato varieties with you. So as I mentioned yesterday, each row is divided into at least 2 varieties. So 4 rows times 2 would be 8 varieties, but we did sneak in 10 varieties because I don't plant very many Roma, the plum tomatoes, or the orangish yellow tomatoes. So they don't take up a lot of space. So out here we have Skyway 687, Rambler, Windup, Maverick, Roadster, STM 2255, Red Snapper, and Red Deuce. Those are our 8 varieties of red round regular tomatoes, beefsteak style tomatoes. And then we have Mariana, Roma, or plum tomato, and Carolina Gold. Boy, it is another beautiful day here on the farm. All right, we're out here running our first string trellis. This is Natalie's first time doing the Florida weave, as well as Emma and Elijah. I'm going to demonstrate how I taught them to do this here in just a second, so you can implement this in your own garden. Way easier than using a tomato cage or a trellis up above your tomato plants. So our rows aren't too long, about 500 feet. So we got 4 rows, 500 feet long. We'll go down, turn around, and come back on the other side. So we each get to do 1 row today. Everybody's shoulders are getting worn out. We just got done working in our greenhouses up there. Debranching, lowering, suckering, clipping. So a lot of times your hands and arms are up over your head. It gets to your shoulders after a while.
And back.
Yeah, try to use your legs. Squat down, do the squat. So many of you watching this right now are probably wondering why we don't have a PVC pipe extension, so we don't have to bend over. I don't like that method. I mean, I could have brought some out here for these guys to try to see if they like that better. I feel like it's harder to make sure you keep your string tight. There's more of a chance of it getting slack on you. And I can fly down one of these rows in 5 minutes. So once you get the hang of it, it's not that big of a deal. But if you have back issues, it might not be the best job for you. But it's not that bad to bend over. We'll have 2 stringings where we have to bend over quite a bit, but then we'll be up, you know, about 3 foot high, and you don't have to bend over anymore. So we'll probably run 4 to 5 strings, and just the first 2 we have to bend over quite a bit to wrap around the post. So at the beginning of the row, I pounded in a steel T-post to act as our anchor. I don't like to use wood ones at the end just because I've seen them get pulled in by all the weight of the plants as they grow and get loaded up with fruit. And I've seen them break even. So we don't want that to happen. So steel T-post at the end, and I'm just coming down the line here. I want my strings to be about 2/3 to 3/4 up on the plant, just so it captures it. I don't want to be too high. The plant won't get caught by the string, and if it's too low, the plant's going to grow several inches a day right now, and you know, in less than a week it's going to flop over and we'd have to come and string again. So in order to not have to come out here every week to do this, we want to make sure we have that string at the right height. We come to our post, I'm going to grab it with my left hand, and my right hand is now freed up to go up and over the post, never letting up on the tension of the string. Come on around the post, and now we're off to the next one. If you're right-handed, you want to go counterclockwise. That's why I'm on the back side of the row, heading that direction. I'll turn around when I get to the other end, and I'll come back on the other side. So here I am at the post, holding it nice and tight, grab it with my left hand, never letting up on that tension. Now my right hand is free to go up and over the post. And then wrap on around, and keeping this together is important. If I would wrap around like this, when I came back on the other side, my string's gonna be forced to be up that high, and then my strings aren't parallel, and your plant will flop the direction of the lower string. Off to the next post, up and over. Off to the next post, up and over. Once you get the hang of this, you can fly down the row. It's a pretty quick, easy process. All right, I got my daughter Natalie holding the camera so she can film me and explain this process a little better. So just watch me do this for a little bit, and then I'll give you a close-up. All right, so we're capturing the plant about 2/3 the way up. Come to the post. If you're right-handed, you know, like I said, we're going counterclockwise. Never let up on that tension. Grab it with my left hand. Now my right hand is free to pull the slack up and over. Never letting that tension up, and off to the next post. If my plant's falling over a little bit like this, I just grab it, make sure it's captured. Natalie went a little high here on her first pass down here. See how I just barely captured that plant? That's what we don't want. That string should be down here a little lower. And if they fall out, we'll just come back and tuck the plants up in between the strings once they grow a couple more inches. So if you missed it earlier in the video, we put our stakes 5 feet apart. Our tomato plants are 2.5 feet apart, so we're putting a stake every 2 plants, which is a 5-foot spacing. Once you get the hang of this, you can fly right down the row. And see, I'm not bending over that much. I use my legs. And since they're on raised beds, you know, they're up off the ground about 5 inches higher than I'm standing. When we get to the end, same deal. I'm gonna wrap around it. I'm just gonna rub it on the post to break it. Tie a simple double knot. Done. All right, we just finished up stringing our first row of strings using the Florida weave, and they're just gonna walk the rows to make sure all the plants were captured between the strings. And they'll tuck them up in there if they'll reach, otherwise we'll just get them all next week when we're out here doing something else. So that's how you do the Florida weave. Very simple and effective method of trellising your tomato plants, and it can be used in your garden just the same as we're doing it out here in our fields. If you want to see more explanation up close on larger plants that are about this high, I actually have 2 other videos explaining and demonstrating how I use the Florida weave in that greenhouse right there. I think I pointed to it. It's hard to see in my little camera screen. So that's where our grape tomatoes are, and I use the Florida weave up there with all steel T-posts, which is another method you could use or implement in your garden. Everybody's yelling at me to film those 2 giant white swan They're flying over my grape tomato greenhouse right now. Probably can't see them. Anyway, as I was saying, if you don't have these wooden stakes, you can use steel T-post or anything that you can pound on the ground that's going to be robust enough to hold up your plants as they get heavy and loaded down with fruit. So I'll drop the links to those other 2 videos where I explain this in more detail on our grape tomatoes down in the description box below.